All right, ladies and gentlemen of Hashtag Nation, you have pined for it for so long. We've been telling you guys we were going to do a live stream, but I wanted to get the right mixture of ingredients for this live stream tonight. I have two gentlemen that, if you're a Bills fan, you know who these guys are. One of them we've had on quite a bit. The other one is your favorite radio host of Double Nickel Zero. We got Greg Tompsett of Cover One and Nate Geary. First of all, thank you, gentlemen, for sharing your time with Hashtag Nation tonight. And we're going to talk about the Buffalo Bills offseason, free agency, salary cap, all that good stuff that's been beaten to death so far by everybody. So first things first, let's get to introductions. Greg, how you doing tonight, sir?
Good. I am ready to beat more dead horses. It's going to be awesome.
It's unfortunate it happens so much. And everyone's favorite QB1. Nate, how you doing tonight, buddy?
Very well. It's good to be with Greg again. You know, I'm glad that you were able to create this reunion. It's been a while since him and I have hashed it out. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. I didn't know it was going to be live, though, so I would have worn something nicer if I had known it was going to be live.
Hey, man, there's only so much you can do. All right.
Your hair
can't
has
look
nice
as good
height.
as you.
I like it.
Oh.
I love it all. You guys are rocking the unbelievable hairstyles, and I got a hat on backwards. So
well, you're a teacher, so that makes sense.
All right. So first things first, a lot of speculation going on out of One Bills Drive. What is Bean going to do? McDermott, all these other guys. What are the Buffalo Bills going to be doing in this 2020 offseason? They have a ton of money to spend, but we know how Bean, during the embedded series last year, he was talking about, listen, other players see what you pay certain guys. So I don't expect him to break the bank for certain guys. I don't know about any Amari Cooper 6-year, $150 million stuff that I've been reading a bunch of places. But, I'll start with you, Greg. Going into this season, we're going to see two things. One, we're going to see Brandon Bean have to re-sign guys that he's drafted. We haven't seen this yet. And the other thing is going after free agents to try to arm his team to get better than a wild card playoff berth. So what do you see as the formula that Bean is going to try to follow this off season?
So there's a couple different things that are out there depending on who you follow and what kind of things you look into, how nerdy you get into some of the CBA language. I did an article a while ago. You heard some folks like Matt Fairburn and Joe Biscaglia talking about it. Without the extension in the CBA, there are some things that prohibit them from doing some normal spending. One of them is called the 30% rule. It just means that what you normally could give a player like Deion Dawkins or Matt Milano an extension, you give them a big chunk of money now, a signing bonus, $10-20 million, but their salary is the same for this year. For Dawkins, it's $985,000. You just get the benefit from that. He gets a check in hand now, and the security that he's going to get his $13, $14, $15 million a year for the next 4 years afterwards. If they don't reach an extension on the CBA, the 30% rule means each salary can't be an increase by more than 30%. And they do that because in theory, that means if there's no CBA extension, there could be a lockout, there could be no games next year, and you can't kick that can down the road and benefit from that this year. That's why they build it in there. So if that doesn't happen, if you talk about doing extensions, and like you talked about, I think that is right on the docket, Matt Milano, Trey White, Deion Dawkins, maybe Jordan Poyer, those kind of players, that could be $30, even $40 million worth of money. All of a sudden now, not quite half, but 40% of your cap space is soaked up because you had to bump up the salaries of those players now. So if they are able to reach a CBA extension, I actually think it opens up a lot of avenues. I think we'll see those extensions announced pretty quickly because they can do them in the normal traditional fashion. And it realistically could be one entire splurge signing, large level signing, more than what we may have seen.
Nate, what do you got? We're talking about, I always fancied the Buffalo Bills as the Seahawks when they were just rolling over cap. They were trying to build it up to try to pay some of these guys that they're going to have. They've been hitting on draft picks. They've been doing really well. Now it's time to start paying some of these guys, as Greg even said. You're going to start paying Milano, Dawkins, Poyer, White. White's pretty controllable for a few years, but what do you see the Buffalo Bills doing in this offseason?
Yeah, well, first of all, gentlemen, cheers to having the first GM in my almost lifetime getting to re-sign his own draft picks. Cheers, gentlemen. So cheers to that, first and foremost. Secondly, Greg's point's really important in understanding how the CBA could potentially affect how aggressive the Bills are in acquiring free agents. I think either way, though, I think what we know about Brandon Beane, and I think this was something that the hockey team was lauding their general manager, was understanding the cap and sort of being the cap guru. Turns out the Sabres, maybe that's not the case with Jason Botterill, but for the Buffalo Bills, what Brandon Beane, I think, sticks to are the percentage of cap. And I think they have a hierarchy of players, meaning positions that they believe that, maybe deserve a higher percentage of the overall yearly cap than say another. And I think the offensive and defensive lines probably have a little bit higher of a percentage of that cap space that they're willing to spend than, say, I think the wide receiver position. And I think that's something to keep in mind when you are thinking about, well, what are the Bills realistically going to do to address the wide receiver position? I think last year they went out and signed $7 and $6 million onto the salary cap at the wide receiver position. And I think you might look at that historically, especially over the last few, let's say 4 or 5 years, where they've been pretty consistently at the bottom 4 or 5 in total spend at the wide receiver position. I don't think just because they have the ability to spend a little bit higher of a percentage, and let's say maybe get to 15th, 16th, I don't see them being the team that is going to be in the top 5 of in the NFL paying the receiver position. I don't think that they're going to go out and sign an Amari Cooper to some crazy, $15, $20 million per year contract. That's not in their DNA. And I don't think that they believe they're a wide receiver away, which may be the one situation. If you have the cap flexibility of your quarterback and you're still on his rookie deal, and you believe that your roster is one elite receiver away, then maybe that's a move you consider making. But I don't think that they believe that's where they are. And I just truly don't believe this is a team that wants to get into the 10, 11% range at the wide receiver position in terms of overall cap spend. So, the roster DNA is really interesting on how he's building this thing, but I think the defensive line is likely going to see some money injected into it this offseason, like it was really in their first offseason when they go and get started to Lo Tulele and Trent Murphy. So and Trent Murphy could be a player that we see coming off the roster this offseason. That wouldn't necessarily shock me. And the Bills too, at where they are right now, and roughly 80 million and some change, would have the ability to almost get themselves to about 90 million if they move on from the likes of, as I just mentioned, with there's a couple of names, Greg, right? Trent Murphy's one.
Murphy,
Feliciano,
Croft,
which I don't believe
DeMarco,
is even in question. Yeah.
Spencer Long.
Yeah, there's a couple of names that you could get yourself to 10 million extra, but it's not like they need to do it. But in the NFL, I think we all know, because we hear the trade rumors with the LA Rams and Darius Slay, that no matter what general managers and owners and head coaches say, if you want a player, you have the money, you'll figure out a way to make it work.
Yeah.
One quick thing to add, Mario, I didn't talk about earlier. I do think the priority and the majority of money is going to be on the extensions and the new players. I think, to Nate's point, they're not going to be shy. It doesn't mean they're not going to spend any money. And that I think that when they vet someone out who they know is going to be a high character player at a position of need that they value, they're willing to spend big money. They're willing to spend top of the market one technique money, top of the market center money. And that those were guys that were from different teams coming in. They had no direct connection with Mitch Morse. There was no Carolina pipeline. There was no former coach's history in Kansas City. There was obviously a relationship with Andy Reid to be able to call him. But I think that you could see that. And I think there's a handful of high-end guys, I'm sure we'll get to it later on, that could have that kind of money spent at a defensive end, at a pass rush position, that has that kind of domino effect on the rest of the defense that could be really beneficial.
So I haven't heard a name and I'll get to my point in a second, but I haven't heard a name said in a while by you, Greg, which is Vic Beasley. Are you off that train now, or what's going on with Vic Beasley?
No, I mean, he's still certainly in that second tier area. I think that some of the names are more likely, like a Mario Addison. I know Everson Griffin got released today. I think he's in that tier of, hey, we re-signed Shaq Lawson. We didn't get the Matt Judons or Yannick Ngakwe's of the world, but we want an upgrade from a pass rush standpoint over Trent Murphy. So we re-signed Shaq. We're going to release Trent Murphy, bring in, again, Mario Addison, Everson Griffin, Vic Beasley, that tier of guy that might be in the same ballpark financially as Trent Murphy, but they might bring a little better edge on 3rd and long. I could see that kind of move, or the opposite, that if we were to splurge on a guy like Judon or Ngakoue or whoever makes it out there to market, that I don't think we re-sign Shaq Lawson, and then maybe that's a higher probability that Trent Murphy stays for that final part of his deal, or they release him and bring in a guy that's more rundown focused or a better contributing player to whoever they sign.
Yeah, the thing that I always run into that I always, and I have to talk to Paul about this all the time because he's a salary cap guy, and he always had to teach me. He's been teaching me for about 6 years now about the salary cap. I'm like, why they cut this guy? Why they cut that guy? Because my focus a majority of the time is solely on the field. I'm usually looking at how this player does, how's he fit in the system, how does everything intertwine. All these guys you're talking about, I don't know how they fit in certain defenses. Are they dynamic players? No doubt. But if you look at a Trent Murphy type of guy, and you look at it like an Addison for that matter, those two guys are cut from a McDermott defensive cloth. Where they're the lunch pail hard hat guys. They're going to set the edge. They're going to perform their duty that you ask of them. They're not going to be able to go eat the quarterback a lot of times in what you need and what a lot of people want here in Buffalo. So I always run up against that so much where, okay, you look at the salary cap, you look at some of the salaries that the teams have, and Trent Murphy, I'm just looking at it right now. He says you save $8 million, you take a $1.75 million dead money bond, but that's not the sole thing that you have. So if I looked at John Brown, you save $6.5 million if you cut him. You have to take a 3.2. So it's not always, because I know a lot of people will rush to that and say, okay, you could save this much by getting him, you get somebody else. I understand that. But the system that has been in place for McDermott and Frazier, how they decide to run their defense, there's been a history of how McDermott likes his defensive ends. How does he like his defensive ends on each side? The one that rushes the passer and the one that kind of is the bookend on the other side. So while I would like those guys, I mean, having a Judon, oh my God, give me Judon right now. You know what I mean? Ngakoue, I love him right now. And the other thing I got to ask you guys as far as this goes, is it Lotulelei or is it Lotulelei? Because I always get it wrong. What is it?
I've always been told Lotulelei.
I've also been told Lotulelei.
Oh,
yeah.
God.
Yeah. I think that's how his family pronounces it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, well,
it's like how you would pronounce my last name in Irish. It's a Geary. That was actually, that might have been Italian. Actually, I don't know. You might.
No flair.
You threw a little spice on that, I know. But,
every spice and everything nice. But the defensive end position is the one position I think that if you're going to set the market at, this is a year to do it. I mean, there are a lot of different kinds of players. There are a lot of different style players. I think the player that criminally gets under talked about is Eric Armstead, the defensive end from the San Francisco 49ers. We're talking about a big player, former first-round pick, had his best season in the contract year, which is very Shaq Lawson-esque of him. And you always have to worry if you're a team that's out there adding free agents. You always want to be careful of the guy that comes on in a contract year. And they didn't do much before that, and that's kind of the things you have to worry about when you're a general manager. But Eric Armstead's a really interesting name for me. He's huge. I mean, I think he comes in something to like 6'8", and had his best season in terms of sack numbers and pressures. I mean, the defense as a whole did. I'm sure having Nick Bosa on the other side didn't probably hurt him very much. But he's a really interesting name for me because he may not be a guy that's going to come in here and give you double-digit sacks, but I think he could absolutely help create a dominating line of scrimmage. As you mentioned, as I totally agree with you about the Sean McDermott sort of style in which, or the roster makeup of each position as he does. You're right. Like that sort of responsible run defender on one side who's capable of setting the edge and not losing contain. And then, which in his defense allows the other defensive end to play a more aggressive and I think more pass rush happy style position, which is what Jerry Hughes has been in for the last 2 or 3 seasons. And it's helped him, I think, listen, I mean, he didn't have the sack numbers last year. His pressure numbers are still right there, though. And Jerry Hughes, I thought, as much as maybe in games he started to lose them a little, that he still had a fine season, that you're looking forward to having Jerry Hughes back on the roster as your primary pass rusher. However, if we could get Jerry Hughes into being more of a secondary pass rusher role and have a legitimate, defensive end who is a stand-up or hand in the ground sort of versatile player that can come off the edge and give you 11 sacks, man, you insert 11 sacks into this lineup, have fun. That becomes a very formidable group, front, middle, and back. If you added 11 sacks into that lineup, Everson Griffin's an interesting name to me too, who was just released. So there are names available if they strike out or decide not to set the market and go after one of these big guys.
Well, the trickle-down effect of what you have of being able to allow Ed Oliver to develop at a normal pace, being able to have those last 2 years of Jerry Hughes' deal maximize the value, being able to take advantage of that back seven and their coverage ability because you have a guy that is able to win a one-on-one matchup, be an individual game wrecker. It's by far, I think, the most impactful domino effect they could have had of any position. And that's the one piece that's really been missing from this defense at this level over the past several years. They've put together a consistent top 3, top 5 defense in the NFL without an individual game-wrecking presence. It's all been scheme and the sum is greater than the whole is greater than some of the parts, all that kind of thing of working together. Having one guy who can just say, no, it doesn't matter, I'm going to beat you and I'm going to get to the quarterback. It would be fantastic to have that guy and let everybody else take a step back in the attention they get from the offense.
Well, I mean, in the defensive scheme that he runs, though, in Frazier McDermott, it's very, your responsibilities. Are you guys saying that you would sacrifice that type of player, a player that knows his role, and I didn't mean to sound like The Rock there, I apologize, but he's able to play where he needs to play and do everything he needs to do. He doesn't get outside the box, so that the whole scheme of the defense works, and why you have been a top 5 defense. Now, if you have I'm not saying it's going to be an undisciplined guy, but if you have just a maniac out there that is able to generate plays on his own, but more often than not, he's letting guys go by him because he's trying to force a play or do something outside of what the whole defensive scheme is. That's the only thing that I always run up against. And there's a reason why Murphy was brought here, and not any other big name guy when they did have a few bucks in their pocket to sign him. So that's
the only thing with Murphy. The only thing with Murphy though is he was paid for his potential. He was paid for part of what he did in a season that was shortened in injury. And what we saw from Trent Murphy in his first year after injury was a disappointment. Surely, I think that they definitely assumed they were going to get a healthier version of Trent Murphy his first year back from injury. But as we know, not everyone can have an Adrian Peterson-like 6-month ACL recovery period. There are very few players like that. And a lot of times, more often times than not, you do see a season lag where a guy doesn't look exactly the same athletically until that following season, which is totally normal. But this year at times I thought he stood out to me in the Houston game. I thought he played very well in that game, even though I still have refused to rewatch it. I won't rewatch it, and I have no plans on rewatching that game. So from my evaluation standpoint, it is just based on me only watching the live game because, again, I will never watch that game again. But other than that, my problem, I don't know, Greg, if you feel the same way, but my problem with Murphy a lot of times was just there were plays that were, and I don't have any in particular on top of my head, but just frustrating plays that sort of Trent Murphy at times seemed to let leave on the field. And in particular, as a pass rusher, he's very much underwhelmed me in his time here. I don't think he was necessarily brought on to be a responsible run fender, a Shaq Lawson type. He was brought in to, I think, on the other side of complimenting Jerry Hughes as another legitimate pass rusher. And I think that they paid him with the thought that he flashed enough in his full-time duty to be a guy that could get to double-digit sack numbers or 9 or 8 sacks. We just haven't seen that materialize with him. And for me, the savings on the salary cap, if you're going to set the market at the position, if you're going to go get an Eric Armstead, you're going to go get one of these guys at the defensive end position that's going to cost you $15-17 million a season. Well, then I think then you've made the decision that you need to move on from the however $8 million savings you're going to get from cutting Trent Murphy.
Yeah, it's hard. I feel I like Trent Murphy more than the general consensus, but only because the general consensus is so low. Yeah. I think he's better than Daryl Johnson. I think he's better than Mike Love. I think he deserves to be on an NFL roster. I don't think he's a $9 million player. We haven't got that production. I don't see any reasonable scenario we're going to get that production. The benefit we have is Brandon Beane took all that, bad cap medicine for us, and now we don't have to make financially driven decisions. Yeah. Now he's one of the few guys, there's only 2 or 3 on the roster, where if they are a tiebreaker, real close, and the football decision is borderline, there might be enough financial benefit that it's a tiebreaker for them. But realistically, I don't see Tyler Kroft getting cut immediately. The Greg Olsen signing was the one exception there. No. I don't see him just getting cut immediately because we bring in some mid-level tight end. I think they want to give him a healthy offseason to see it. He could be a surprise at the 53-man cut down like LaShawn McCoy was. I kind of feel the same about Trent Murphy. I think there's a path where we add both Matt Judon and Mario Addison, and they need to cut Murphy because they need that money for Addison. But short of signing 2 free agents, I don't see him getting immediately cut. But they could get to the point where, hey, we drafted Bradley and I in the 2nd round, and we signed Mario Addison, and now we're going into the season, and we feel comfortable with Jerry Hughes and Daryl Johnson, and now we don't need him any longer. And we've given camp to see those guys come in. We realize Anai is the guy that we wanted, and when he's matching up to where we drafted him at. And now we can cut Trent Murphy for football-related reasons and simply benefit from the $8 million in cap savings, not because we were forced to. Bills fans have been so conditioned over 20 years to immediately look at the roster and look at, hey, which is the guy that we can most afford to cut? And that way it's just a practice. We always had to look for that guy every single year, and now we don't have to. Yeah, but and now we need to train ourselves that, hey, that's not the primary criteria anymore. Good teams don't do that. Now we can make football decisions and just let the money be a bonus.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you hit the nail on the head, Greg, as far as what has been going on with the Bills recently with Beane and McDermott and how they're running the team is – I think Beane's going to double down. I think that even if he signs somebody, he's going to draft somebody at that same position. He's been doing it for the 2 years that he's been here drafting. I mean, you want to think back just for recent history. He signs Jordan Phillips, they draft Oliver. He signs Kroft, they draft Knox. He signs Yeldon 2 days before the draft, they draft Singletary. You know what I mean? It's been that part. Kyle Williams, you re-sign Kyle Williams you extend him for 1 more year, and you get Harrison Phillips. So. Harrison Phillips, the 2 things that are interesting. I know I'm flying around here all over the place, but I mean that first point is I want to say that he will double down. He definitely will double down, and whoever he signs in the off season, don't just take that draft pick off the table. He may do that. That may be something that he does, unless he signs 2 like he did last year with. He signed Brown and Beasley, and they didn't draft a receiver. So. If you look at how they're going to be coming into this year, are you guys both banking that Phillips and Lawson aren't on this roster for next year?
I think Lawson has a higher probability than Phillips. I'll be really surprised if Brandon Beane's number matches what Phillips' representation their number is, and that they don't get a higher number than that out on the market. It's not 0%. There's a chance that market is like Quentin Spain last year. Quentin Spain's representation thought they were going to get really highly paid. They sat out there for a while. All of a sudden, some of the different spots soaked up. All of a sudden, the Titans signed Roger Saffold. Yep. And, oh, man, my spot's gone. What am I going to do? And he signed for $2 million, and we benefited from
he was
that.
Out there for a while in free agency. It was a long time.
Was one of the most confusing parts of the offseason last year.
Well, people were trying to figure out. I'm sorry, Greg, go ahead. No.
I think Jordan Phillips could have that experience.
No.
I think that could happen. Thinking they're going to get the $10 to $13 million, and all of a sudden it's been a month.
I'd overpay at $7 million. I would overpay for Jordan Phillips at $7 million. And that's I think that's overpaying.
I think he's a $6 million player, and if it was 8, I think I'd even stomach it. But I
might, I might. Only because I like him and Ed Oliver together. I think that they are used to it. I think they played well together. And that's the thing. I mean, I've been one of those, go get me Chris Jones. Oh my God, go get me Chris Jones. But the only problem is you've dedicated that first round pick to Ed Oliver. I don't think you can go out and set the market at the position and have another guy who's making that kind of money and coming in here and going to play 48% of the snaps. I don't think that's what you want to do. And if Chris, if you could find me a way to get Chris Jones to play the one technique and him sign up for that, then hell yeah. But I just don't think that's going to put him in the best position to succeed. So it just goes for me, the players, and actually I like your point, Mario, because I sort of think about their philosophy of kind of going with a veteran, but then also bringing in a young guy. They did it at linebacker. They brought back Lorenzo Alexander, knowing that they were going to have 2 young guys in Matt Milano and Tremaine Edmonds. So that's another really interesting position, guys. I mean, how the linebacker position, we're talking about the defensive end, and there's a legitimate hole at the strong, the strong side linebacker position right now. So it'll be interesting to see how that gets filled. I would assume they don't go to the draft for that. They don't really have that quote-unquote veteran linebacker right now on the roster. That's really the position I think that maybe you could see them go spend a little bit of money on. But they have their signal caller, their middle linebacker rookie going into year 3. So he's still 2 years clear out. Matt Milano's gonna get some money this offseason, but I don't think he's gonna get, he's not gonna get $15 million. So we'll see what happens with that. But I think the linebacker position is one to really watch.
Yeah, and just to try to hit those points real quick. Quentin Spano, the biggest question about him coming in when he was in free agency for so long was everyone thought was it him or was it Taylor Lewan playing next to him? Why was he so successful in that offense? And then when you go to Jordan Phillips, the one thing that I always like to bring up, and Paul rolls his eyes at me all the time, is you got to look at the 2 guys that are here that are in the front office that are making some of those decisions for the Buffalo Bills, and Dennis Hickey and Dennis Locke. I mean, those 2 guys were in Miami when they drafted Jordan Phillips, and that's one of the main cogs why he was here. And if you want to think about, did you already get your value for Jordan Phillips? I think that's the biggest thing here is that they're going to go value over overpaying a guy that they thought was a productive player. But those 2 guys being in that room, I think, are huge. It's hugely understated because that's the reason why Jordan Phillips is here. That's why Sonoris Perry is here. That's why Frank Gore maybe came here. So all of those things intertwine. When you think about it, those guys have a huge influence in that room on who the Buffalo Bills are going to sign and who Bean and McDermott who eventually bring in, as far as trying to balance out what are we going to pay them versus what do you think their production would be on the field. So, I mean,
Jordan Phillips he's a perfect example that fans take the first 70% of the story and then think they know the answer at the end. And it's, hey, you did such a great job finding him as a value. You claimed him off waivers. You motivated him. You gave him a 1-year contract and he performed. End of story. Their end of that is, oh, now we should pay him. The end of that story is go find me the next Jordan Phillips. Go find me the next underutilized, wrong scheme, malcontent in his system that isn't being properly appreciated. Bring that guy here and let him be on a 1-year prove it deal that can take the 35% of snaps that now if, Ed Oliver gets up to that 65% of snaps, or I think they're going to push towards, have the guy who can play 35% of snaps ball out and earn himself a contract and just keep rotating in guys who want to come in and perform on limited snaps and then earn themselves a deal. Find the next guy. Don't pay the guy because you already squeezed the juice.
I'd also say too, if who's another interesting name who keeps signing 1-year contracts. If Jordan Phillips says, go get Ndamukong Suh.
It's not crazy. It's not. Gerald McCoy is the same kind of name.
McCoy. Yep.
When fans and people were talking about, let's franchise tag Jordan Phillips, I wanted to reach through my phone and scream at people.
This is a family show.
if we're throwing around obscene amounts of money for a 1-year defensive tackle, get me Ndamukong Suh or Gerald McCoy. Let's go have fun.
Please, the idea that Jordan Phillips is going to get a $15 million franchise tag, and then all you had to do was see the original report and who wrote it.
Yeah,
Jason Lockenfora.
I'm gonna skirt past.
He made
that.
it funny.
He's literally on the payroll of multiple agents. Like that's his only job. That's who he's paid. I get it that he technically is on the payroll of a media company. He is paid directly by an NFL agent.
Jason Lockenfora is the Yahoo Sports liaison. He's not really a reporter.
Oh my god!
But anyways, Mario, sorry to derail your show.
No, that's fine. I have you seen our episodes? This is what we do. No, but as far as completely lost my point. It was so funny. But
you're welcome.
The thing, yeah, thanks. The one thing that it's people know it, but they don't think about it at the time is, and you guys both know this. I'm preaching to the nation here, and this is that you're not going to pay a guy for what he already did. You got those 9.5 sacks at a discount, and it was because you had other guys eating bodies, and Greg, I saw the show that you had this morning with Fairburn. You guys hit the nail right on the head. It was like a lot of those sacks just kind of fell into his lap. And you're not going to pay a guy for what he did. You're going to pay him for what he's going to give you. And that sometimes it's a misnomer with some of the things. Hey, he did all this stuff. Let's reward him. No, that's not how the business.
That's why I think people are mistaken on how much Jadeveon Clowney's going to make. I think he's a player that you could look at in that same lens, Mario, and say, hey, listen, I get who Jadeveon Clowney was. Is he still that player with those injuries, that all the injuries that he's had? And not only that, his sack numbers, they have not been impressive. He has been a sort of stay-at-home defender, and that is not what you pay $20 million a year for. So it'll be interesting. I don't think he's going to get as much as he thinks either. That's another interesting name. I think he'll end up back in Seattle, and I think Seattle will end up getting a nice deal on that because I don't think he's going to be. I think there are many a man ahead of him at the position, to be honest.
That's interesting. I haven't heard that avenue of it, but it's not crazy. I could see him getting a disappointing market, at least compared to the crazy people right now. I think would put out 5 years, $110 million. And if it's softer than that because of some of the questions, that could be interesting.
Yeah, and to Nate's point, if we could try to get this thing back on.
Oh yeah.
To Nate's point about the defense, and we were talking about you've had Zoe for about 2 years now. Filling that the Swiss Army knife over there. As the Sam linebacker, and then you got Milano and Edmonds. People need to realize that here, and I'm going to bring the on the field stuff again. That's what I always hearken to is the fact that when he was down in Carolina, you had a 2 linebacker system pretty much in Thomas and Kuechly. What's that?
It pretty much did this year too.
Oh yeah,
for the most part,
what he's comfortable with. He's comfortable.
They're not running a ton of 4-3, right? I mean, they're not running. So it's not like, do they need a guy that's going to give them 50 snaps a game? No. To be honest with you, they might look at that position and say, we want somebody like an Anthony Barr who can play at times as a linebacker stand up. But also, we might look at that position and say, okay, well, we want a guy who can also get after the passer in third down situations. Absolutely. As a blitzer, because they blitzed more. Yeah. Anything that to take that away from Bill would be.
That's an added bonus that we get to steal him from them. But
any former Patriot has that added bonus in. Yeah.
Oh my God, you guys are.
I hate him though. I am not a big fan of
Patriots. I hate if Bill's willing to let a guy go. I hate that. I
don't like Van Noy. I don't like him as much as I hated Joey Porter, but I sort of don't like him as much as I hated I don't know. I can't think of a good equivalent. Who I wasn't a big fan of? I wasn't a big fan of Travis Henry. So I don't hate him. I hate him a little bit more than Travis Henry, but less than, say, Joey Porter.
He's not Jarvis Landry level. He's not Brian Cox level. He's not Julian Edelman level.
I had forgotten since you said his name that I actually hate Jarvis Landry more than Joey Porter now.
Oh yeah, Jarvis Landry and Julian Edelman are right there, like my top 2 most hated players in the NFL.
Didn't Edelman get the man of the he got some award.
It wasn't man of the year or anything close to that. There was a Boston area group that gave him a freaking like good.
Yeah, it was
Samaritan.
the local Alcoholics Anonymous group that nominated him man of the week.
It was literally days after his arrest report came out of him jumping on top of a cop car and getting arrested for freaking vandalism. And then he got awarded like this good character award. It was hysterical. Whatever.
That
sounds like
hysterical.
I
can't.
Sounds a lot like Julian Edelman.
So a couple names. I know. I don't know that the 25 snaps a game. People look at Zoe's overall snap count as something of a role that, we need to fill that, when really it's probably going to be three different guys cobbling together the special teams, the pass rush, the strong side linebacker. It's a possibility we get a guy that checks two of those boxes. Unlikely it's all three. And don't get me wrong, a guy like Anthony Barr, Kyle Van Noy, that Jamie Collins, that kind of level of player would be great. I don't know that I expect that. There are two more reasonably priced guys that I could see. Kyler Fackrell, the guy out of Green Bay, he's a big guy. He's probably two of the boxes of strong side linebacker and pass rush. And Kamala Correa is a guy out of Tennessee that is probably strong side linebacker and special teams, and at least checks two of those boxes and probably could do it more in the $4 to $5 million range than what the 10 plus million that a guy like Barr or Van Noy might cost.
I don't think Collins makes that though, and Collins is an interesting name for me.
Yeah. I'm curious what his market is, because he went out and got that enormous Browns deal, then went back to the Patriots for the freaking league minimum and was playing at a defensive player of the year
literally
level.
Player of the year level. Yeah.
And then now is going to go back out on the market again. And I'm curious, do the Patriots actually pay a little bit? Can they afford to lose both Van Noy and Collins?
That's the question.
I don't know. I'm curious where he gets paid at and what that market is, because people are going to try to hold the Browns over his agent's head like a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
But he also deserves some money. I'm curious where he ends up.
Yeah, it's
you can have your show back, Mario.
No, I'm good. You guys take it over. This is phenomenal. I don't have to do any work. This is great.
Yeah, you're basically like Aaron Quinn, except you're much better looking. And you guys have just as much sex. I mean, how many fucking kids are you guys gonna have? Jesus Christ.
I'm done. I'm done with you.
Here, I'll try to rein it back into football one more time.
No. Geary's only saying that because I threatened to choke slam him through a table when we were doing a broadcast for high school football. About a month ago or 2 months ago.
That did happen. That's what I brought the sex up for.
Yes, that's why you did that.
Yeah.
I'd like to declare I have had the sex.
That's you.
I have two children. I have legal documentation. I have had the sex. Well, my wife has had the sex twice.
True.
Yeah. There's literally pieces of paper proving it.
Yes. So I think one interesting piece is that everyone is looking linebacker forward for the replacement for Zoe. And a topic that came up this morning with my discussion with Matthew Fairburn is that maybe the Bills start to get a little more creative and they go linebacker back as that replacement. And maybe it is time for that Shaq Thompson role, that big nickel. Yeah, hey, we kind of dabbled with Dean Marlowe. we kind of played around with maybe Saran Neal could be that guy. I mean, Isaiah Simmons would be unbelievable.
Yeah,
but Kyle Duggar was the guy who came up in our discussion about it. But maybe they actually invest in that kind of piece. That hey, maybe you take part of Taron Johnson's role and part of Dean Marlowe and part of Saran Neal and part of Lorenzo Alexander, and you just get a guy who can play 80% of the snaps because he's big enough to hold up on some rundowns, but also cover the majority of the time. And then that guy's worth paying $10+ million or drafting in the top 3 rounds because he's not a 25% snap guy. He's on the field all the time. And then you don't have to have a tell that your base defense is on the field versus your nickel, because now your third guy is Shaq Thompson type player where they can play in coverage and you're not tipping your hand, and that's worth a little bit more money. So I don't know I don't find an obvious guy in free agency that fits that. I think there are some players that you could play around with that with. It would have been a reason to go after Minkah Fitzpatrick last year to be able to play that kind of role. It's a reason that you might look at. Obviously, Isaiah Simmons is ridiculous, but a guy like Kyle Duggar in the second round could play that kind of role, or you could find a free agent that plays that maybe instead of a guy who does Zoe's version of strong side linebacker and D line, you pick a guy that's more half safety, half linebacker, and can play more snaps.
Well, you got a guy. You got a defense now for a majority of the players. 32 straight games. You got tape on, so you got to bring some new blood into this and infuse it into this defense that can show you some different looks because they're going to start finding all the weaknesses in this defense. I mean, not many people have done it since they've been in the top 5 for 2 years, but after a while, Craig, why do you got to do that in the chat? You just want to,
I can multitask.
Shiny object, but that's what you have to do. You have to try to, I like the idea of getting a guy in Zoe's role that can play back more than forward, because what you're going to do is you're going to end up taking care of everything going forward in the offseason. So why not? I mean, it's no tell, like I said before, it's no tell to see what Bean is going to do at the draft if he ends up signing 2 defensive linemen and a big nickel. All right, that doesn't take it off the table that he might draft. And I ended up taking a look at Duggar after your guys' broadcast this morning, and I was thoroughly impressed with that kid. I mean, and I'm gonna steal your line, Greg. He does check a lot of boxes if you're in the type of defense to be very versatile as far as from that Sam linebacker role. I love what he brings to the table. And, another thing that people get misconstrued with is everyone says trust the process and the culture of Buffalo. I understand that. I unfortunately am from the mindset that I would take 22 convicts and win the Super Bowl every year. I don't care. But you have to have certain guys on this team that got a few screws loose. I mean, you look at the champions of the past 10 years, they have players on their team that really, they're okay, all right, you just go over there, all right, and I'll tell you when to come on the field, and then you can play what you got to play. But, you're not taking the guy out to dinner later. But we need more of that on this squad. I think we need more of that nastiness on this squad.
More grit.
Grit? I'll take grit.
Toughness. Well, I think that there's an element of team building that you build the right culture and have multiple years of locker room put together in the sense of how a body builds white blood cells, that then once you have a really healthy immune system, you can afford to introduce some more questionable things and heal it and survive. And that, I don't know what that amount of crazy is, but it came up in my discussions about Stephon Diggs, and that I think we're in a position. I don't know that I'm ready to sign Antonio Brown after the things that I've seen. I don't know that any organism can survive that, or any system has the white blood cells to heal that. But you look at some of the rants that Stephon Diggs went on last year, some of the crazy quarterback. If Josh Allen isn't mentally tougher than Kirk Cousins, we're screwed anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So if we're going to introduce a diva like that, but we have the other 52 guys all buying in and being like, hey, come on, man, this is not what we do here, I think that you have a chance to at least manage that. I don't think you're ever going to shut it down, but if we can go after, and I think the same thing would apply to an Odell Beckham Jr. I don't want a bad person, but I don't mind a selfish, more, not the Boy Scout choir boy, checks every single box. It doesn't have to be that guy every single time. I think you can make a few more aggressive reaches, because now you've built that culture and you're not building it from the beginning. I think in the early years, you can't introduce that because you're still trying to build your system and your culture. Now you've established that you have a core of 30 guys who all get it, and you're going to draft some and sign some others. You can introduce one little bit of crazy and still have it work out because you have the core that's going to keep your culture together and introduce them.
Yeah, it was weird. I mean, you talked immune system and you talked white blood cells, and there was not one Magic Johnson joke at all.
It's money heals all things. It's crazy how that works.
I'm out of here. I'm going to retire. So, guys, I want to break something up, and I think, Greg, you're a numbers guy. I'm pretty sure Nate can count. Let me just try to bring this to you guys. I'm interested in this. In going to the school of Paul Wineski, who is my partner here at Hashtag Sports, he's been teaching me about the salary cap, the draft, and everything. And I'm trying to recognize certain patterns going on with certain teams going on. And I came up with something. I mean, this is not in any documented book or anything. We did an episode about it last year, but I came up with the 50-30 rule. So basically what it is that if a team around draft time has 50 players or less on their roster, I mean 50-51, you can play with the numbers a little bit, 50-51, and $30 million, or less over the cap, those are teams that are more likely to make moves for draft picks at draft time. Because it's the cheapest option currently right now. I've seen it. I've been only studying it for about 3 or 4 years and how the trends have been going on. But that's what I've come with. Is like when you have roughly around 50, 51, 52 players and you're about $30 million, over under the cap. What they do is that's what teams are more likely to make moves during the draft. So what I did was currently right now, I mean, I know these numbers will change by the time we get to draft time. Players will get cut and all this other stuff, free agency. But currently right now, you got the Falcons, Vikings, Ravens, Packers, Bears, and Rams that are dangerously in that.
Yeah, they
range.
won't be doing very much come free agency.
No,
right?
that's what I'm saying is that when those guys end up coming in, and I think the Jaguars, I didn't look at the Jaguars to see what they were.
They're
but
definitely
I think
there.
they had like 60 some players though. But that's what offsets it is the fact that okay, we got enough players, we don't have to make any moves in free agency, but and our 7 or 8 draft picks are enough for us to get through and see we'll sign guys here and there. But I mean, from those teams, I mean, we already talked about Griffin that got, earlier in the show we talked about Griffin, but you talk about the Falcons. They really let me just dispel everything for Hashtag Nation. No Julio Jones is coming to Buffalo because they can't afford to get rid of him. All right, let's just put that on the table right there. But of the Falcons, Vikings, Ravens, Packers, and Bears and Rams, who from those teams do you think the Bills could kind of slide in? Because we're talking about Bean. He's got 2 5th-round picks, 3 6th-round picks. A lot of these teams will need bodies in camp, cheap bodies to fill their roster. What are players from those teams, if you guys have any off the top of your head, that you would want to try to see the Bills could try to snipe from those teams, because they do have the cap space to do it.
Yeah, so there's a handful of guys. There's a handful that I looked at specifically in Minnesota. Obviously, Yannick Ngakoue is my dream from Jacksonville, but I think they're going to cut like 6 freaking starters to be able to franchise tag him because they're bastards. Minnesota actually has a lot of free agents coming up here. So I don't think we're going to go after Anthony Harris. He is a really good safety. I think he's going to be one they try to figure out a way to keep. However, having Harrison Smith and Anthony Harris meant that Jaron Curse, their backup safety from Clemson, hasn't got a ton of playing time. He's, the cousin of the freak, and that applies to him as well. He's a 6'4", 220-pound safety. I'd love to be able to take a shot at him. Both Mackenzie Alexander, Trey Waynes, Xavier Rhodes are all out there. Trey Waynes and Mackenzie Alexander are free agents, and they're talking about Xavier Rhodes might be a cap casualty or a low-cost trade acquisition. I think those are some names that could make some sense. I think that if we lost out on Kevin Johnson, that Mackenzie Alexander is a name that could kind of plug into that compete with Levi Wallace world. Again, Everson Griffin opting out of his contract today. I think that was kind of like how the Panthers and Greg Olson announced that they mutually agreed to part ways. I think it was just a courtesy to a respected player, and that they let Everson Griffin say that he opted out of his deal, because if anybody didn't look, he opted out of a $14.5 million contract. He's not going to get $14.5 million in this coming year. So I think that was a courtesy to a respected player that, hey, I got some bad news, we're going to let you go. However, it is a player option before that. So if you want to wait till the 16th and wait for us to cut you, that's fine. If you want to get a head start on that and control the narrative yourself, you can announce it as you opting out of the player option, and we'll do that just out of, you've been a good player and we'd love to have you back at a reduced salary. I'm guessing it was something close to that. So there's a handful of names out there, and I think you're spot on, Mario, in finding those Jacksonville's, those Atlantas, those Minnesotas, those Rams, where they're really in a tough spot from a cap standpoint, and whether that's manipulating the trade, whether that's them looking to move down in the draft because they want to accumulate picks and you can move up at a discounted rate, or plucking off guys that are free agents that they can't afford to re-sign and normally would have. I think any one of those avenues are areas to take advantage of them when they're in a vulnerable position.
Geary, you got anybody? Or no?
Not really. I mean, here's my thing. I think the one thing that I do agree with you about this particular topic of, especially some of these cap-stricken teams, you start to look at a team like the Atlanta Falcons, right? The Atlanta Falcons are probably going to move on from Devonta Freeman, their running back. They can't really afford to pay him, and now they're going to be in a position where 2 years ago they had Tevin Coleman and Devonta Freeman, and there's a very good chance that come September, whatever, when in the first game is, they may have neither of those players.
Yeah.
And they may also not have an Austin Hooper. So they've got a lot of pieces at the wide receiver position. They've got a former first-round pick who didn't see a lot of time this year in Caleb Geary, the offensive lineman from Washington, who they drafted and had big expectations for. Injury happened, and he didn't get to have the season that he wanted. That's a team that needs more offensive line. They're going to be probably in line to draft a running back, but they are something like 65% of their cap space is between Julio Jones, Grady Jarrett, Matt Ryan, and Keanu Neal, maybe?
Yeah, maybe the linebacker.
What's his name?
Well, Desmond Trufant.
But out of there was like five players that accounted for 65% of their salary cap. So that's why you're going to see moves that they're going to make pretty quickly here. Minnesota's another team. Dallas is going to be that team because they're already talking about what potential they might be in the market for Darius Slay, and it's like, what? I also saw a potential that they might be going after another corner on the market instead of re-signing Byron Jones. So. I don't know. There are a number of teams that I'll leave it to Jerry Jones to fuck that up, and I'll let Byron Jones go free, or he's gonna end up signing Dak Prescott and Ezekiel Elliott, and likely have to watch both Amari Cooper and Byron Jones walk out the door, and all the power to him, because I just cannot stand the Dallas Cowboys. And anytime that they can be dismantled piece by piece, layer by layer, I will watch from afar.
I second that.
I'm just looking at Atlanta. When you were mentioning Atlanta, basically the cap number for Matt Ryan and Julio Jones is $44 million, and if they had to cut those two gentlemen, it's $126 million dead money bomb. Are you kidding me? How do you sign that?
They have 6 players that have a higher cap hit than our highest paid player.
Mm-hmm.
Did they?
The Bills made the playoffs and they didn't, by the way.
Right. And they were bad.
Did Daniel Snyder hijack their draft room or their free agents or their signings?
Yeah, no. Here's what happens when you set the good players age, and they're the perfect example of a window that was predicated on a quarterback who was already kind of old in the window. So now he's really starting to lose his arm strength at this point. Like he and Phillip Rivers, he's not as old as Phillip Rivers, but he sure as heck looks like he's got the same arm strength as
Matt Ryan's a sneaky 34. That's a sneaky 34.
Oh, really? Yeah, it is a sneaky 34. Yeah.
Yeah, I would have guessed 31 if you had asked me on the spot.
Oh, really?
34 is a surprise.
I don't know what I would have said if you asked me on the spot. I would have said he's as old as Mario, though.
He'd be dead.
Yeah, and he turned 35 in May.
Wow, so he's vested. He's a vested 34. Yeah.
Sneaky.
I just you guys brought up Phillip Rivers. I saw the meme earlier today about the
all of his kids.
Yeah, they said he was leaving.
Was it from Cheaper by the Dozen?
Well, no, he was leaving L.A. and they said the meme said that it was the first time he pulled out of anywhere in 16 years.
That's I'm glad magical. This went from #sports podcast to sex talk with Sue Johansson. late night on Comedy Central.
Oh my God.
Come on, act like none of you guys learned for the first time what a clitoris was on Comedy Central. Come on.
It's an important educational moment.
It's every man's listen, if I tweeted a picture of Sue Johansson right now, everyone would say, I know
Yes.
her. Yes, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it right now. This is
no, that is a key moment. I'm excited for that thread. We need to end this podcast because I need to go see that.
Oh my God. It's like it's like I'm in class and I got two students talking to each other and I gotta get back to the whiteboard.
I am dead certain that both Nate Geary and I had comments on our report card through school saying, really nice kid, smart kid, talks way too much. I am dead certain that I knew that was on both of our report cards all the way through school.
Report card ever. Nate is a terrific student, 90s, but he has to sit in a special corner of the classroom where he's not allowed to talk to other students.
If he could just stay in his seat and be quiet, we'd be really, really good. Yeah.
A pleasure to have in class. That's basically what it was. That's all I wrote. So, ladies and gentlemen of Hashtag Nation, thank you for joining us for the live stream tonight. Give a follow to both Greg and Nate on Twitter if you need Bills news, if you want to find out about draft picks, anything of that sort, free agency, all that stuff. Greg and Nate are really good follows. I hear what you said, Nate. What'd you say?
I said tweet was sent. My Sue Johansson tweet.
Oh,
yes.
Sweet. I can't wait to see that. I can't thank these guys enough for joining me tonight. And Hashtag Nation, you guys take it easy. We're out of here.
It was a lot of fun tonight, Mauro. Thanks, man.